Today, let's learn how to use DaVinci Resolve Studio 19's new Intellitrack point tracker with the grid warp tool to realistically place any image onto this curved widescreen computer monitor. We're going to convert to linear light so we mimic the real world. We will independently control the reflections, utilize some fake camera blur, and even whip up a custom edge mask to polish the whole thing up. Now, even if you do not have a curved computer screen that you need to composite with, you can use these skills to fit graphics onto your lens distorted anamorphic footage, stuff without straight lines. Chapters are marked, and the footage is available on creativevideotips.com/thecuttingclub if you want to join and follow along. So here's our widescreen computer monitor. It's already been pre-trimmed, so before I take it into Fusion, the first thing I generally do is I make a duplicate of it on the timeline to work with. So I'm going to Option-Shift-Drag it up. It makes a duplicate and keeps it from going left and right. On a Windows machine, it would be Alt-Shift-Drag up. And I want to trim out handles. So I'm just going to drag out 10 frames left and right of what's actually used in the cut. That gives us two things. One, we can make edit changes later on to the comp. And two, anytime we use motion blur, it can be calculated so it exists on the first frame. And that's actually really important. I also like to right-click on the clip and say clip color, make it orange so it stands out a little bit more. And just so we're all on the same page as far as color space and that goes, we're working standard color science, DaVinci YRGB, display referred, no special color management. We're going to take care of that ourselves in the Fusion page, which is what we're getting to next. So if you want to just load whatever the highest clip on here into Fusion is that the playhead's over, just click Fusion, and now we have access to it. Now, I personally don't like this left and right view that exists here in Fusion. I like a top-down approach, kind of like Nuke does. It just makes better use of the viewer space. So go to Workspace, Layout Presets, Fusion Presets, Mid-Flow, Vertical, and that'll give you a top-down approach. And now when you take a look at this, I still have two viewers. I just want the bottom one, so click the one that you want. I want the one that has an image in it. It's a true viewer. So click the one you want right there, and then it gets nice and big. And you can sort of move around with your node flow to make it sort of a top-down approach. For some reason, it always goes left to right to start. I don't love that. A couple other settings that I like to do over here in the flow is I right-click over here, I say Force Source Tile Pictures. This just gives you the thumbnail so that you don't really have to rename stuff. Renaming takes a lot of time. I don't like to do that. As well as a couple other options in here. Things like direct pipes, build flow vertically is actually something I like so that it expects things to come in from top down. The other thing you can say is I like to arrange tools to the grid. That just makes them so they sort of snap along. So linear is extremely important for compositing if you want to do it right and you want things like blurs and transforms to actually look realistic. And so how do we get this to linear light? It's how light works in the real world. Well, on the clip itself, on media in ones, they have in the inspector area over here, you'll see there's a source gamma space. All you need to do is you say remove curve. That removes whatever curve is on the footage. This is just standard Rec 709. And then you need to go to the space section and give it instructions on what the gamma space it came from was. So it'll remove the proper curve. Now, standard Rec 709 footage is always going to be ITU 709 scene. So choose that. And it strips the game off, and the image should appear darker over here because it's basically, you see it's applying this curve here that kind of dips down. A normal 709 curve actually goes the opposite direction where it would kind of make a curve that goes up. So this just sort of does the opposite of it. It gets it to a straight power curve line. Now, we're not actually looking at this correctly until we take care of what's called our gamut view LUT that's up here. So this little button here is basically just a way to view the image correctly, but we're leaving this as linear so that the compositing math is actually working correctly. But we still can't view linear light right on a monitor because there's a gamma on your monitor itself. So what we're going to do here is we're going to change this to gamut view LUT, and under the gamut view LUT settings, I'm going to click Edit. And the gamut view LUT settings, what we want to be doing is we want to be adding our gamma back into the viewer, right? So instead of remove gamma, we don't want that. We want to say our output space is going to be whatever your computer monitor is calibrated to. Mine is sRGB. That would be common for most people. And just change it to sRGB, add gamma. Sure, you can leave white point adaptation. That's fine. But if you want to save this as a default so this happens every time when you load a new gamut view, you can right-click on the word gamut view, say settings, and then save default. Okay, so you can see the difference of it on and off. That returns it basically to the original state for our visual perception, but we're actually working on linear lights. So here's an example of what a tilt shift blur would look like without converting to linear. And then if you did convert to linear, you just get this much nicer, more realistic looking blur that happens. And this just goes across the board for so many operations. So it's really worth converting to linear. All right, I'm gonna get rid of this example here and we'll pull in our other footage that we actually wanna be loading into this project for the screen insert. So why don't we use this right here. I'm going to just drag, you can just open your media pool even in this mid-flow vertical to get a 21:9 asset. So I'm going to change this back to our buffer split white view. And this is important. If you don't know what the resolution of the computer monitor is, you kind of have to guess, but a lot of times, you know, for this one right here, I could look up LG 21:9. And we want to work with source aspect ratio is the most important thing. Source resolution is good too, but the main thing is the aspect ratio should be correct for the display. So this is 3440 by 1440. And we need to convert this guy to linear as well. So this is an sRGB graphic. So media into, we're going to go to source gamma space, remove curve, and the source on this curve is going to be an sRGB curve. And so now this is working in linear. So both our footages are in linear now. To get them back into 709 to go back to the timeline, I'm gonna just click right after our media in, hit shift space, type in gamut, and that puts it right in line with our pipe. I'll bring it down here to the bottom because it's gonna be the last thing before it goes back out. And we wanna say we're gonna be using our output space is gonna be ITU 709 scene. And we're going to add the gamma back into it. And we can say for source space, no change. And so when we take a look at this here with this view LUT back off, we go back to the edit page. You can always check to make sure your color management is good. If you click the little bypass button and you don't see a change, that means you've done a successful round trip on your going into linear and back out of linear. Now let's get to tracking this thing. All right, so I'm gonna load media in 1 into my viewer. You can tell that it's media in 1 up here. Turn our view LUT on, and we'll add the new point tracker, the Intellitrack. So to add the new point tracker, we're gonna hit shift space, type TRA to get the point tracker. And the default is actually Intellitrack. That's the new default. It's like an AI-based tracker. The first thing I would say before you even start tracking, you can see it drops an initial tracker 1 on here, is make sure you load by picking and flicking. So I'm holding down and dragging over here to where you see tracker 1 up in this viewer. So that way when we run the track, you can actually see the results on the footage. And we're going to be tracking the corners of the screen. It's important whenever you do screen footage that you generally want to leave the light off. And I'm just sort of dragging from that center point to the corner here. And I'm going to do these one by one. And the nice thing about point trackers versus a planar tracker is that you can manually sort of babysit and modify the points really easily. So once that is set, you can just simply choose this track back and forward and backwards button. For what we're doing today, it doesn't matter where you start or end. And you can see it's going both directions on it. It works pretty fast, relatively. And you can come through here and just quickly see, hey, is it actually following that point? If it's not, I have another tutorial that shows you how to babysit and modify through occlusions and all that sort of stuff. But so let's say that point is done. I'm going to come back over to my tracker list, hit this tracker button twice till you get this little 0, and makes it so that I can add further tracks, do these one by one for each corner, and not have to worry about overriding it. So to add another tracker, because I need to do 4 of these for a corner pin, click Intellitrack again. It dumps it pretty close to the right part of the screen that I want it. It's going to be the upper right. Click and drag to that corner over there. And then I'll do the same thing as I did before, where I'll hit this track forward and backwards button. And one thing they added here in Resolve 19, which is nice, is these track individual frame buttons, which didn't exist. You can come over here if you need to and sort of babysit and make sure that did hold on to that corner, which it did. Just rinse and repeat now. So I'm going to uncheck the checkbox, lock it, add a new one, come down here to the third point, lower left corner, and track forward and backwards right here. Looks like that one stick just fine, and we'll go over and do one more Intellitrack to the lower right corner. You can see it get like a zoomed in view of it, and we'll try tracking forward and backwards here as well. All right, That one looks a little crazier, but I'm just gonna zoom in so I can make sure that point has not fallen off, and it has not. So now that we have all 4 points tracked on here, we can actually get a quick preview of how this all looks by just taking our media into, which is our overlay comp right here, plugging this into our green foreground of the tracker, take a look at the tracker, and nothing happens. Why not? Well, we need to come over here to operation and change the operation instead of it being none to make it used as a corner pin. So if I click down on here and say corner positioning, what that does is it maps you can see the top left corners of these trackers. It just basically lines it up for us. But we can see we have a curved screen if you look at the original footage that kind of curves this arc here, and the point tracker is just going a straight line from one to the other. So to warp this into place, what I'm going to be doing next is adding a grid warp after media into. Media into is our screen insert. So shift space, GRID, grid warp, and we get this crazy looking thing that has a source over here and a destination. What grid warp does is it maps pixels from the source to the destination. So on the destination side, the first thing I want to do is set this up. And I like to use selected instead of region. Region in Magnet basically is used for puppet warping and stuff, and I want to have a little bit more precision on just making a straight, bendy, spline warp curve. So I'm going to change this to selected and turn my grid size down to 1 by 1, which just gives me these corners. And actually, because in this instance I have like a straight line in the center, I want to be able to control that, make sure my monitor is in the center there. I will change my X grid size to 2, so you can see we now have a spline point there as well. And now our destination is set up, but our source is still crazy with lots of points. What you want to do is once your destination is set up, is you say copy my destination to the source. So click that button, and now you'll see if you click the source button, here's where the pixels are coming from. Now we want to tell it where are they going to. Where they're going to is the destination. So I'm clicking back on destination, and you can make distortions here on destination, and it'll distort on the output, the downstream, right? So what I'm going to do is I'll select the top point right there, just sort of lasso select. And if you do that, you can see we have these tangent handles, right? So you can move these however you want, but the nice thing, if you want to keep this nice and symmetrical, is if you just start tapping the down arrow on the keyboard, you can see as I'm moving down and then shift down arrow, it does it in more increments. You can see how we're bending that image. Well, when we bend that image and we look at it through the tracker, if I drag the tracker over here, you can see we're actually bending it so that it'll fit inside the monitor over here, right? So this is one instance when you might actually want to use 2 displays at once. So if I click this dual button viewer up here, we could look at our grid warp result at the top to sort of see that, and then we can get a better idea of how it's actually going onto the screen down here. Now, remember how I put this center line down the middle? You can see on my monitor over here, it's not quite the center. I'm going to fix that by coming over here and selecting both of those points, lasso selecting those, and then doing like I did with the down arrow. You can also go left and right. So I'm going to use shift and the left bracket arrow to get this so that it's more lining up visually on the center of the computer monitor. Although I have a nice little logo, I know. If I look at this down here, this LG logo, so I want to see that first. So what I'll do is take a look at through the tracker down here, and we'll go ahead and start moving that top point up. So I'm doing shift up, and I've clearly gone too far with that. So I'll select both of those, shift right arrow, and by doing it with the keyboard, as I click around here, I'm making sure those splines are as smooth as possible when I do this whole action. So let's take a look here. I've clearly gone way too far down on the, well, maybe not too far down because we need to have some of that black bar for the menu bar. But I think I've gone too far down on the top, so might come up just a little bit. But we're going to refine this in the next couple steps here. So I'm going to go ahead and disable this top viewer. A lot of people don't know this, but it's good to go ahead and turn this off. So grid warp, you can see here is selected under the 1 viewer. So to disable that, I'm going to hit 1 again so that it's not occupying RAM when I'm not even viewing it. I'm going to pop this up. So we're just taking a look at this right here, the tracker view. And we can do a little bit of fine tuning by taking a look at corner offsets and that sort of thing. So on the tracker itself, if you take a look back at the tracker tab, we have offsets for each of these tracking points. And what that means is if I were to make these active again, so you can actually see those paths, see that squiggly line there, we can actually offset this corner to get it precisely where we want after it's been tracked. That means when you track something in the corner, you don't actually have to use the corner you tracked to place something. So what I mean is we've got Intellitrack 1 selected here. We've got offsets 1 and 2. If I click and drag this, I can reposition this after the fact. If I hold down Command and Option, I guess it's Command, it's going to give me a little bit more fine precision of that point, right? So I can get these repositioned after the fact to really fit within the bezel. So I will come over here and zoom in, and it's Command mouse wheel to zoom in Fusion, and it goes right to the cursor, which is super, super handy. And I can sort of really fit this in so that I'm trying to get this as pixel perfect as I can in the corners. I'm going to come down here to the lower left, Intellitrack 3, and kind of just moving that up and down until I see that it fits as close as possible. And I'll come over here, Intellitrack 4, moving the offsets. Maybe they needed to be moved, maybe they didn't, but that just gives you an opportunity to really sort of refine those. So when we take a look at the result and I click away, those corners are nice and pinned. Next up, I want to take a look at how do we get reflections back. So if we saw the original screen, we have all these nice reflections that make it look realistic. All right, so the quick and dirty YouTube tutorial is going to tell you on the tracker itself, we're going to change the apply mode here to screen, and you could call it done. The problem with this though, is if you go to settings and you start to turn the blend down, what you're actually doing is you're turning down the graphic underneath. You're not actually controlling the reflection. So I'm going to show you a better way, the way that I like to do it. So I'm going to change, instead of being foreground over background, I'm going to change this to foreground only, which is just going to give us the output of the original, insert, right? So that's basically what we're looking at there. And by the way, the reason you see black is because I have this set, the checker underlay turned off. This is probably what it looks like for you. But what I'm going to do is, this is set to foreground only. We want to add on top the reflection. So the tool to do that is going to be the channel boolean. So that's the most clear way that I like to show this. So I'm going to click anywhere in this empty space, hit shift space, type in channel booleans. Now this is important. Choose the one that has the S on the end, BOL. Click add, and it puts it in our flow. And how is this all going to be connected? Well, let me show you. So we're going to change channel booleans over here, operation to add. And we want to do nothing to the alpha channel, okay? So I'm going to just say do nothing there. And this is going to give us control to add the original pixel light of the reflection on top of the background. So the way the channel booleans works, it's kind of similar to merge, where yellow is going to be the background, green sort of like the foreground. So what I want to do is this will be our background, the output of this tracker, which that's the gray output box goes into the yellow background of the channel booleans, and then the green foreground of channel booleans is actually going to be the full image. So we're going to take this cutout and put this full image that has reflections on top. It's kind of weird, but follow me, okay? So this is sticking on top. Now we can see the result of this is we have this crazy thing because we have this unpremultiplied alpha channel that's sitting out there hanging out. But the other thing that's given us now, if I move this over here to get some organization, is the channel booleans under settings. Now I can actually control the reflection, but I got to deal with this whole thing that's unpremultiplied, this sort of checkerboardy thing over here. And one simple way that you can take care of that and do that is if you add shift space after the channel booleans and there's a tool called alpha multiply. And as soon as you add the alpha multiply afterwards, it does what it says it does. It multiplies that alpha channel out. So now if you take a look at this blend slider, now I'm actually controlling the reflection that's on top, not that screen overlay that's ruining your underneath image, right? So if you take a look at this, it still tracks and everything. So by separating it out, we can put this back on top of the original footage, okay? So how do we put this back on top of the original footage? Simple. You probably know this one. It's going to be the merge node. So if I just add a merge after this, shift space, MRG, adds a merge after it, it puts it into the background because that's the first thing that goes into the merge node. That's fine by now because I want to show you another shortcut. And what we want to do is take our original footage, which is media in 1, plug this into merge, and it's in there, but it's in there backwards. So Command T is a great little shortcut for merge. So Command T flops these two, watch. See how those two just change colors? So now the insert is sitting on top of the original footage with this channel booleans, which has complete control of our additive screen reflection that we've added on top of there. Pretty cool, right? All right, so we have this pretty realistic looking screen reflection that's been added on top here, but if you take a look at the pixel values, if I move my cursor over here and then look down here, you'll see values are over 1. So to quickly clamp those off, which is what you really should be doing before going back out to your timeline to 709, so you don't get any weird looking artifacts, is clamp those off, and I like to use a brightness contrast node to do that. So after the channel booleans, after the node that created that, that clipping, I'm going to come over here and hit Shift Space and type BC for brightness contrast. That places a brightness contrast right afterwards. And if I load this over into the viewer, you can see I'm still over 1, but over in the inspector, we have clip black, clip white. Choose both those buttons, and now take a look, and you'll see those are all clamped off at 1. So they're basically, there's a ceiling to them, so you're not getting any weird values. And you come back to your alpha multiply. Now we look at our merge. Now we have a usable image that we can keep refining further. Right now our gamut that goes back out to 709 immediate out sort of on the wrong section. So I'm going to just disconnect this by just clicking and dragging. I'll lasso select the gamut node that gets us back to 709 to our media out, and stick this down here. So if we look right now, our merge is our final output so far. But one thing that's really nice to do anytime there's some sort of a CG element is to put a little bit of a blur between the computer graphic element and the footage that's on screen. And so what I will need to do that is to just apply a blur to the edge is create an edge mask. Okay, so we're going to create an edge mask that's our own custom one that's completely super flexible and super controllable. And we're going to do that by first taking a look at the output of the tracker alpha channel. So if I load the tracker over here and I take a look at the alpha channel only, which you can see by coming up here to say alpha or hit A on the keyboard, we've got an alpha channel. So because we already have a cutout here, we can actually do a little bit of trickery to just look at the edges of it. And the way I'll do that is first by adding a blur node, Shift Space Blur, going from the output of the tracker into the blur. And again, I'm just looking at the alpha channel. It's A for alpha, C for color, so A for alpha. And if I just blur this a little bit, you can see if I come over here and I turn this on and off, Command P turns on off, we've sort of blurred that edge. So there's a little bit of into aliasing, there's a little feathering there between the edges. And to actually turn this into just the edge mask piece of it, what we need to do is I'm going to add a curves tool. So we're going to color correct this alpha channel in kind of an interesting way. So now that we've got this curves tool down here, the regular color curves, Shift Space color curves, we're going to come over here to the right. I'm going to make a point right in the middle. It doesn't need to be exact because as soon as we select it there, we can go over to the in point, and I do want this to be in the middle. So I'm going to set this to 0.5. Sorry, the in point will be 0.5 and the out point will be 1. So it puts a point up there at the very top, you'll see. And then the out point for the end of the curve, I actually want this one to be brought down to 0. And by doing this, you can see what's happening over here in the screen. We're creating an edge mask. And if you want this to even be smoother, you can select that top section there, hit S for smooth. And this gives you more control than any other way that I know to make an even edge mask on both sides of the edge, right? So if you want to take the blur here and increase the blur, on the edge mask, you can see how that works. So you have complete control as well as the curves control. But for this sort of thing, I just need a couple pixels. This is maybe even too many pixels. Maybe make this to 0.5, just a tiny bit so that we can apply a blur that takes the CG part and the real footage and kind of blend those together. That's what we're looking for. So I've got a nice edge mask that we've created with a blur of 0.5 and a color curves that looks like this. So where do we blur it and how do we blur it? We've got our merge, so we have our comp that's already put together. Now if this happens is all white, it's because we're still in the alpha only view. So if we come up here and change this back to color, I'm going to take this and let's look at a corner real close. And I'm going to add a blur to this whole image afterwards. So Shift Space BLR. So we're blurring the entire image. We'll take a look at it. And once you blur the entire image, it kind of takes pixels from both sides. But I only want to apply it to the edges. That's why I made the edge mask. I'm going to give myself a little bit of room. The blur tool has a blue mask input, so I'm going to take the mask that we created, apply it just on those edges, and you can see this is going to be such a subtle thing, but if I turn this off and on, it helps sell those edges a lot better. Here you can see it nicer. It looks like it was photographed. Okay, most people are not going to do this, but if you want to be the best, I suggest you consider like this technique. And so there's how you do your edge mask. The other thing that happens when you photograph something is part of the screen is in focus and part of it's not in focus. So how do we mimic that lens blur? I like to use what's built in here is called the tilt shift tool. So that's a Resolve thing. I don't think it's in Fusion, but if you just click over here, shift space, type in tilt shift blur, this kind of gives you sort of a realistic blur to your image. And so what I would do is we've got the result of our grid warp. I kind of want this to be tracking with the camera, so I need this to happen before it hits the tracker. You can put it right after the image or right after the grid warp. I think I'll stick it right after the grid warp. If you hold down shift when you take a tool and you get this blue, this sort of line here, that's green and yellow, it'll just insert it for you. So that's just a tip. If you need to get a node out, you can hold shift, or you can disconnect things as much as you want. Gray is the output. It'll go straight, it should go straight into the yellow input of tilt shift blur, and then we'll stick this back into the tracker like we had before. So now what this allows us to do, let's look down here at the end of our comp in this blur. We have a tilt shift blur that allows us to sort of control the focus on where the camera was set. Now, because this was a Blackmagic camera app, this was the iPhone footage, a lot of it is in focus, but there's always going to be areas that are more in focus than others. And this sort of lets you sort of set that plane of focus, from how far away the camera was. So you could sort of set this wherever you needed it to. Let's say we want this area more in focus, and then you just over here, you got in focus range, and you probably need to make this pretty far out. But that's just, if you had shallowed up the field, that's how you can easily take care of that right there. If you want to do any sort of refinements to any of the edges, maybe you bent something far too much. You can see this top part of the bezel was probably way too far out. You can go back to your grid warp, select that point, and then just, like we did before, I'm just sort of shift with the arrow keys to get that to really fit that bezel, so we keep all those original little tiny reflections that are in there. Same thing down there at the bottom. I think I went too far. So just want to point out, before I select my next edge, I'm clicking away, so don't have any selected. Then I'm lasso selecting that point right there on the grid warp. Grid warp tool selected, but I'm looking through the blur, so I'm looking through the results. Select this right here, shift down arrow, and I'm setting that right into place, like so. So it looks pretty good, right? If you want to preview this, this is basically our setup. So we've got a grid warp that warps it into place, a little tilt shift blur, which gives us a little bit of that realistic lens blur. The tracker is set to corner position foreground only. That's important. So we're taking only the foreground out of there. We're adding the background footage reflections on top. Okay, this is set to foreground alpha, do nothing. Okay, and then out of here we're going to be clamping off those highlights with our brightness contrast black and white clipping. We're going to multiply out that alpha channel, which kills off the unpre-multiplied section over there. We're going to stick this back on top. And we've done the little bit of edge blur. We did our custom, edge mask over here. If you just take a look at the alpha channel only, that was what that was for. Take a look at this, hit C for color. And the final step before it goes back out to the timeline is we have the gamut node that we set up for our color management at the beginning, which adds our 709 scene gamma back into the image. So if we take a look at this over here on the edit page, and we hit our button up here to bypass our fusion effects, you can see we've only affected areas of that screen and we've kept all of those reflections. But let's say, hey, the client comes back, we need less reflections. This happens all the time because they really want to showcase, what they have on screen there. First, I'm going to load the blur, so we're looking at this through our view LUT. We come over here, we say channel booleans, settings, and we decrease the blend, which is basically a transparency on the output of the node. Let's say they only want this to be set to, let's do a nice round number, 0.5. So 0.5 reflections added. Command P on and off. And maybe that's a better look for this scenario. They don't want such a reflective monitor. Come back over here, take a preview. Oh, and then one last important thing that I want to make sure you're aware of is on the tracker node itself, anything that moves an item in Fusion. So this is actually, you see how it's moving the screen insert. It has a motion blur checkbox, and it probably should be checked. So we'll go under settings, motion blur, crank the quality up to 10. And it's a very subtle thing, but it's going to apply motion blur to make it look like it was shot in camera with a 180-degree shutter. Go back to the edit page, and it will not play nearly as fast now because it has motion blur. But don't worry, you can render in place, or you could render out of the deliver page, which will give you time code. So that's a nice thing. So if you want to render in place, what I would typically do, I would select the clip first just to keep track of stuff. Maybe give this a comp VO1 over there so that it labels it. And then you can select the clip, maybe come over here first, make a bin called renders, have it selected before you render in place. It just sort of pre-organizes it for you. Right click and say render in place, ProRes 444 for all visual effects. We've already got our handles included in this clip, but if you didn't, you would say add handles. And I basically include everything except for color grading because we'll do that afterwards. Render, it's going to ask us where we want to put it. We put it on the desktop because that's what you do in tutorials, right? You put it over on the desktop. And as soon as it renders out, we should see a nice result that will play back. And it works great anytime you're using, collaboration. I need to share your timeline versus just doing render cache. I have a whole tutorial on that you really should check out. So if we take a look, here is our final result. I'm going to go ahead and mark our clip. I'm going to disable the clip underneath, and we'll hit P for presentation and take a look at what we made. Well, pretty darn good, I would say so for myself. So that is how you bend an image in Fusion. If you need to get back and make changes later on, you right click on it and you say decompose to original. That'll give you access to the Fusion comp in here itself. Now on this grid warp that we worked on, we tucked this in from the original image. If, for instance, you need it to go the other direction, you need it to bow out, what you need to do is first expand the canvas that it lives on. So let's say you're doing some sort of a cylinder that bows out away, it doesn't bend in. What you'll do in that case is you'll use a shift space, a crop tool. Okay, and I showed this on the billboard tutorial I did a few weeks ago that included the planar tracker. On the crop tool, once you get to the crop tool on here, I would just say keep centered, keep aspect ratio is the most important thing. And then this gives you extra pixels on the outside of it so you could grid warp out from it. So if let's say I took this grid warp tool, made a copy of it, loaded it into here, and I needed it to go, further out like this. This will make sure you have those pixels available to sort of track into whatever else you needed to. So it's crop tool. Make sure you use keep centered, keep aspect ratio. And the other thing to pay attention to is always when you use this tracker tool is you need to make sure your aspect ratio of what you're comping in there matches the aspect ratio of the object in this scene, right? So this is 21:9, which was this 3440 by 1440. If you don't do that, things are going to get weird pretty quick. If you ever need to swap out the image, let's say you get a new insert graphic or video that needs to go in there, just make sure it's the matching aspect ratio. I'll show you an example. Media pool. Let's see if we took this screen grab that I pulled of my timeline from a couple weeks ago. This should just plug right into there. You'll just need to make sure that you're converting your other footage to linear as well by saying remove curve. Gamma space is going to be sRGB. Let me take a look at the output here, and it'll look just like that. Hey, I'm Chadwick. Welcome if you're new here to Creative Video Tips, where I teach all things DaVinci Resolve. I appreciate you so much for sticking around, and because there's so much more to learn, I'll see you in the next video.